Sam's up here today to do some taping this morning of you guys. So I thought, well, this morning, because I'm not going to be here all week.
I seen when we went over to Japan.
That's good for afternoon tea.
So what are you baking?
No fingers on a lot of people, ears missing, noses missing, arms missing.
Yeah, is that your one? You didn't have that thing on it last time.
This is Sam's.
Yeah, I've been baking in a square fry, and her sister-in-law likes that one. So we just get it.
She worked in the bank.
All this hooked up and
She
get back today.
married an Australian girl, and she was taking time too. She married an Australian girl.
All right, well, I'll go and talk to Grandad
What do you
George.
think of football?
Oh, I haven't seen it.
I listened to it.
Now I've got
Good. At least we won.
Chilton family tree, the Horton tree.
There you go, Sam.
Okay. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning.
First and foremost. First off, could we discuss any of your childhood memories?
Oh yeah, I went to Italia Primary School. Miss Donnan was our primary school teacher for when I was 5. And as life went on, I had to milk the cows when I come home from school. And if I was 10 minutes to a quarter of an hour late getting home from school, I got a whack in the bum with a cane walking stick. That certainly stirred things up. But I had sometimes 3 cows to milk when I come home. I didn't milk them in the mornings. Father did. Then he went away to work at the mill or wherever he was, rabbiting or whatever. But I had to milk the 3 cows and sometimes separate the butter. The churn would sit down on the creek to cool off, and that helps to make up the butter. On a Saturday, Jack Anderson and I, who's passed, he was accidentally killed, Jack Anderson. Him and I were great cobbers. We had ferrets and dogs, and we'd go away rabbiting for the day. And if the ferrets had a habit of getting stuck in a hole, a rabbit would turn its back on it in a hole, and the ferret would try and work away at the rabbit to get it moving again out of the hole. But sometimes the ferrets would get jammed in there, and we'd have to just cover up the holes and come back next morning. And we'd unplug the holes, and the ferret would come out, and he'd be as full as he could be with eating rabbit. And rabbit skins were, if they were good clean rabbit skins, sometimes in the winter they would bring up to 2 and 6 a skin. And we would pack them in kerosene cases or petrol cases, wooden petrol cases that held tin kerosene tins or petrol. And I forget, I think there was 25 or 30 or something like that to a pack, and we'd tie them down with string. And they would go away to Dunedin or Invercargill or wherever the rabbit skin sales were. I can't think of. I used to, before I left school when I was 15. The old man had the sawmill, a small sawmill, traction engine driving it. And on a Friday, I'd have to lead 2 or 3 horses down to Italia, to the house, and we had 10 acres of ground there, and let them feed and that, and next morning early take them down to the blacksmith shop at Italia Township and get them steel shoes put on their hooves, and all fitted and everything. And he'd be finished, Harry Watt was the name of the blacksmith, and by lunchtime he'd be finished the 2 or 3 horses. Fairly hard going, sometimes 1 o'clock. And when he was finished, you'd just lead the horses back up to Nantwich Street where the 10 acres was and the house. And on Sunday, I'd have the job of walking them from Italia Nantwich Street, right round to the sawmill in the Glenburn Valley. That was south of Italia. That would be 5 miles, I suppose, 6 miles to where the mill was. I'm not just sure of that. And the horses would be ready to start pulling out logs again, or snigging logs here and there for the small steam winch he had. And that would be ready by, it'd be steamed up and everything by about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And they would either saw up logs for timber for housing, that was all native timber, or go into the bush for the day and bring out full trees and bring out logs that were towed down to the mill by the horses or whatever the case may be with the steam winch. But
Can't see anything.
don't disturb us. I've got to try and renew my memory on all that. I left school when I was 15, and Alan Brown lived next door, and he's about 3 or 4 years older than me. The 3rd of January 1941, we both left Italia together. We both went on the express train from Invercargill to Christchurch. Left about 7 o'clock in the morning. I went on up to Duntroon to start serving my apprenticeship in the motor trade, and Alan Brown carried on through to Christchurch to Wigram. In the Air Force he was, and then he went to Canada and then England, and he was wireless operator, air gunner and something else on the aircraft on air sea rescue work. I seen him once or twice before he went to Canada, and then when he came home, I didn't see a great lot of him, but just recently I went down to Invercargill with your dad and seen Alan Brown down there. On a Saturday night when we were kids, if we could sell a skin or two or rake up enough money, around about sixpence or a bob. A bob was a shilling. Sixpence to get into the pictures on the Saturday night at Italia, and threepence for an ice cream, or fourpence for a big milkshake all frothed up and everything. Usually weren't for a milkshake. And the Italia Hall, it was usually packed with, if there was a good film on a Saturday night. As I say, get in for sixpence, and you had threepence to spend, or fourpence for a milkshake, or whatever the case may be. And I also worked for the milk delivery man, a chap by the name of Vin O'Brien, at delivering milk in the mornings before I went to school. And I think that's what caused me to fail when I was in Standard 5. I wasn't giving enough attention to the schoolwork, whereas I was giving more attention to the milk delivery and thinking of saving a few bucks or a few bob here and there. And I used to get 7 and 6 a week for that, delivering milk. At the moment, I just can't think of anything else. Going to school and that, we had the odd fight or two, a clod fight amongst kids and that. Sometimes the policeman would round us up and say, get away home and all the rest of it. There was never any harm done.
What happened to the joker on the swing who sued the dog onto?
It's a chap by the name of Alan Fisher. He was a Italia town clerk. He followed in his father's footsteps and his grandfather's footsteps. Quite a brilliant man, really. Alan Fisher, and I met him at the Italia School Jubilee. But we always thought he was a bit of a sissy, you know. Sissy was a bit of looked after his hair, combed his hair and all the rest of it. And Alan Brown had a dog called Tim, a fox terrier, and at the back of our place in our gully, we had a big swing that swung away up in the end of a rope and would come back into the bank again. And if you fell off or tripped, you went down into the rushes and the gorse. It wasn't so good. And cutty grass and that. So this day, Alan Brown and I and the Maxwell brothers, they were there. We had Alan Fisher there, and Alan Fisher was swinging away out and enjoying himself. And as he came in again to land on the bank or let the rope go, we'd saw the dog Tim onto him. Well, Alan Fisher didn't like that, and in the finish, we couldn't lay off him. He filled his pants with his own dung. But he went away home, and that was all right. And I used to pinch a bit of the old man's blasting powder. That was black powder. They used to use it for splitting logs. And we had it for messing around with blown up banks and trying to fish with it, but we didn't know any better. And I know one lot blew up and out of the tin that singed all the hair off me and all my eyebrows and all the rest of it. But we were there, and occasionally when the nesting season was on, we'd go way across over the Aparima Bridge over to Ringway Ridges and go into what they call the peat bog. And there was big black-billed seagulls used to nest there, and they had young ones, usually 3 or 4 young seagulls to the nest. And sometimes we'd get the eggs, and we knew which ones were rotten. You tell by the weight of them, that holding them, and whether the nest was good, bad, or indifferent. And we'd get 2 or 3 dozen of those seagulls' eggs and take them and throw them into the Aparima River from the bridge. And the eels used to come around, we'd hawk them out like that with a gaff or a spear. I'm going to have a spell for a wee minute or two.
Here you go.
Today is Sunday the 14th of August 2005, and it is a brisk but clear spring day. This year is an auspicious year, and that David Longy has passed away today. Today also is the day following the All Blacks' great victory over Australia for the Bledisloe Cup, 30-13. Other than that, today is a pretty regular day.
You're up here interviewing.
And currently today I'm up here interviewing my grandfather, George Chilton, and my grandmother, Jean Chilton.
Nothing on these.
She's been doing a bit of baking this morning.
Well, that's no good then. Sam.
Well, good morning, Nana.
Yeah, good morning.
And would you be able to share with us some of your childhood memories?
Childhood memories. Well, no, sort of.
Well, what did you do for pocket money and things like that?
Well, we didn't. Well, we had a hall right in front of our place. We say where their house is down the back.
What place was it you lived?
They used to have dances there occasionally, little country bloke, and we used to pick up the bottles. I think we used to get about
What's your feet
sixpence a
It's all right.
there.
What's your feet on those
Yeah.
things?
I think we got about a dozen or something for these bottles. And we used to sell that, and there used to be cocksfoot, a grass growing along the road. And we used to, when it was dry, we used to get that. We had an old bed frame, and we used to thrack. Once it was dry, we used to work it and get all the seeds out of it. We used to sell the seeds. And the neighbours' fence, we used to go around and pick the wool, sheep's wool off the fences and sell that for a wee bit of pocket money. We used to get threepence a week this bed, that would be about 6 today, 5 cents today. But you could buy such a lot with it, lollies and that. I mean, you would get 2 packets of chewing gum for a penny, and 3 threepence would be 3 pennies. And you could get 2 Santy sticks or 2 toffee sticks. You could get 10 aniseed balls for a penny, and the conversation lollies used to have writing on them, and you could get 10 of those for a penny, so you could get quite a big bag of lollies for 3 pennies. We used to, every Guy Fawkes Day, we used to make a big Guy Fawkes up, dress it all up in old clothes and that. We had an old pram that we carted it all around the district. And the money we got from that, we shared it among us, about 5 of us, and we shared it and bought lollies and stuff like that with it. And opposite the shop, one of our friends had a farm, and we used to have all the rubbish and everything all piled on top of that. We used to like that at night, round for Guy Fawkes. We used to go to school by train, most of our time school by train those days.
So. Just under your feet, Mum, there's a strap.
And I wish we didn't have any train to go to until we started secondary school, but primary school was mostly by train.
So
we never had toys, like humans do today. Our parents couldn't afford anything like that. But we just used to play in the hedges, and we had a big high hedge around our place, and we used to have an old umbrella. We tried jumping off to try and fly at one stage. And we all had sort of a job. We had a cow. We had about 3 acres of ground or something. We had a cow, and we all had our jobs to do each day after school and before school. And I had a pet rabbit, a white pet rabbit, and I used to have a harness for it, used to take it for walks. It eventually ate its way out of the cage, so goodness knows what happened to it. We never found it again. We had a cat, and we had the cow. Oh no, we had a wee dog there too, a wee white dog. Anything else?
Was that at Royal Bush, or where was that?
Royal Bush, yeah, Makarewa. So I don't remember living in Makarewa much, although we had about 3 or 4 miles to walk to school. We had no school buses those days, so you didn't. You just had to walk everywhere. Then we shifted out to the North Road out by Kiwi. We used to have to walk to the railway station. It was quite a big walk. Get the train into town, go to school. What else is there?
What do you recall of the Depression years?
Depression? I don't really remember much about the Depression. We didn't, there was a lot of kids at our school, parents couldn't afford shoes and things, and that'd be winter and everything with no shoes or socks on. And we never knew, I never ever had new clothes. I mean, Mum used to make our pants, out of sort of material, old frocks and things. You couldn't afford to buy a lot of stuff. I had a cousin that was a dental nurse, and all her clothes were made down into me. I don't think I ever had a new frock until I went to Tech for a uniform. And you used to have a women's division dressmaker who used to go around, and she'd stay at your place and do, your clothes and things. But we had a cow, and I know during the war, because the war years were there, and we had a cow, and Mum we had hens, and we used to get stuff like called water glass, and used to put that in a kerosene tin, and we used to put the eggs in that, to preserve eggs, if you had spare eggs. The butter, Mum you only used to get very little a week with the little cards you had. so much a week. Everybody
That
got
was
the
ration
butter,
cards.
sugar, butter and sugar and clothing, wasn't it? Was all on coupons. I did have coupons up to recently. I don't know what I did with them. And well, that's really all I sort of can remember. Mum used to make butter, and we lived at the Macquarie Freezing Works, and Mum had a box in the storeroom, and she used to store the butter in there because she used to, when you did baking, it was all done with fat. All your biscuits and everything was all done with fat, and that you didn't have much butter. So Mum used to put butter away so she'd have a bit of butter, you know, for a rainy day.
Coal stoves.
We had a coal range right up till we shifted up to, well, right up till we went to Rakaia. We had the wee tiny districtor there, but yes, we all had coal ranges, do your cooking and everything in, heating up the place. Well, Dad went rabbiting in the Depression. We lived away down a back road in Makarua, and Dad used to go rabbiting to make a wee bit of extra money. And I can remember we used to stay in an old lady's house out at Mara's Bush or Roslyn Bush, and we used to go and stay there while Dad was rabbiting. And that, sort of really can't remember anything else. We were sort of, I wasn't that old really then.
And during the First War, your father, he was in the Otago Mounted Rifles, or?
Yes, he was in the Otago Mounted Rifles. He was a quick shot with a gun. And in fact, I think he won the British Army thing for shooting over there.
He was a sergeant.
Had horses too. He was
Sniper.
mounted, you know, on a horse. He had a horse shot under him. And I know he did time in Malta, in a hospital in Malta, but I don't know whether it was injuries or he was badly gassed during the First World War. He had a few brothers over there too. One got killed over there. I never even knew him. He's buried over there somewhere.
And he was a sergeant, a sniper, was that right?
He was a sergeant major. Dad was a sergeant.
The
Don't think
brother-
any of the others held any rank.
The uncle that got killed, he was a sergeant major.
The Uncle Norman.
Yeah.
Norman Allen, was it?
Yeah.
He was, yeah.
I've got his, where he's buried and everything in there.
But,
And Steve, Jean's father, was a sniper, and he was a tent
His
mate
dad
of
landed
the
in the first
VC
lot that landed
in
at
Gallipoli.
Gallipoli. He was in the first lot. I can always remember him telling us that they offloaded, in our day, you never bought cheese in little packets like you buy today. They used to be big round cheeses done in different, and they used to put a little plug in them to test them if they were right, you know, and pull out a bit of cheese and try. And we used to buy these cheeses, little round cheeses, or our big ones, and Dad said that they offloaded all these on the beach. It was so hot over there that they sort of melted, and they'd have to come down and pull off a big piece, you know, string sort of cheese and that for eating. I always remember that, but I can't remember him saying anything else about, you know, how they got on for food. But he was with Dick Travis when he got killed.
Dick Travis was the VC, First
Yes, he
World
got
War.
the VC.
And him and Steve were tent mates. They were snipers. That was in Passchendaele.
Now you had two sisters and a brother, and your mother's maiden name was?
Something. Yeah, my brother died. He got a disease over in the war. He was over in the islands. He was sent home from Bougainville by ship. He was to go by plane. He wasn't well enough. Well, there were a few Invercargill ones on the plane, and that I never ever heard anything about. It must have blown up a year ago. Shot down. But he arrived by ship, but later arrived in Auckland, and Mum and Dad were sent for, and they told him he'd only lived 2 years, and that's all he did live. Came home, and he'd be at home until he died at home. So he was only 24, 25, I think. Died on Ruth's 19th birthday.
And what did he have? He had Hodgkin's lymphoma, was it? Or?
Parkinson's disease. It was sort of a very rare at those days, no one knew much about it. He was in an American hospital and they picked it up.
And what was his position over in the islands in the war during the?
He was a fitter welder, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was a fitter welder, mechanic. You know, it could have been airframes, it could have been armouring, or what, I don't know. But I've got some photos here of the outfit he was with. But
Before he went into the Air Force, he was in the Army. And he was cooking. He was a good cook.
down here at Wingerton.
Cooking in the Army, he was in the Scottish Regiment in Dunedin. And one of his teachers, I think, from Tech, must have been up there, and when he saw him there doing cooking in that, he went mad. He got him out, got him into his own trade in the Air Force. But we did have a photo of him with the cooks in the Army. I don't know what happened to it. But I think they all were killed. I think, remember, when Garnet came home, he said they'd all been killed, all the cooks. But, and they used to get flour those days in huge big bags. And he used to save the flour bags for Mum. And Mum used to make single bed sheets out of them. You couldn't buy, you had to have coupons, to buy linen and stuff like that. And you couldn't buy a lot of things like that. So Mum used to bleach to try and get the, they used to always be stamped with factory that made them in there. And she made sheets and pillowcases out of those. They never wore out because they were sort of like underneath sheeting. They were very strong. And she used to make, I think some of our pants were made out of those. She used to have used the lining for Garnet's pants, when he was wee, during the war, at the prison, and, it was pretty tough those days. That's to come and go on. But other than that, we got by.
The price of petrol was 1 and 9p per gallon. That was the cheapest I ever seen it.
Yeah, I can remember
that was an
sixpence for a pie in that, and I can remember Miller's Bake Shop in Invercargill. A penny, you got 2 ice creams, or only little tiny ice cream, or for threepence you would get 2 ice creams, 6pence you at the bigger ones, and then for 6pence you get one with a couple of scoops of it. 2 ice creams we used to, and then also when we went to Tech, when we went for 2 years before we went to secondary school, we went to, what did you call it, George? We used to go to woodwork. The boys went.
Manual training.
Yeah, manual training. We went cooking there.
We went woodwork.
Yeah, and the men went to woodwork. And there was a shop in Tay Street in Invercargill. You could go in and you get, say, 3pence worth of speckled fruit. Well, in the fruit season, there might be an apple with a wee piece of rot in it, and they'd cut that out. There might be a peach that had a bit in it, cut out. And for 3pence or 6pence, you'd get a big bag of fruit with a wee piece cut out of it. And we also used to pay 6pence each. When we got on the train, the boys used to collect 6pence each from everyone, and they used to go to the market, and they'd buy maybe a couple of cases of apples, depending on the price. And then when we got on the train at night to go back home, they'd share out the apples, and you might get 6 or 7 or 8 apples for 6pence. We used to have that on the train, and then there was a biscuit factory. Kings's Biscuit Factory was just by the Tech, when we used to go for manual training, and you could go in there and you could get 6pence worth of broken biscuits, and they'd all be biscuits that are broken, be chocolate biscuits, and then you get a huge big bag broken biscuits, and we'd go and get them, eat them. Can't think of what else.
Well, what do you recall of your memories of Invercargill? Like
They call it what?
Invercargill.
Invercargill. Well, it's so different now. You wouldn't know your way around it. I mean, it was all houses. I used to bike into work every day, and it was all houses right out the North Road. Now you're lucky to see houses. It's all commercial buildings and things like that. And the town's changed so much, I just wouldn't know, all the places that were there in our day. About H&J Smith's, I think, is about the only one that's still there. They're all, it's changed so much that I don't know, the old tech, I don't know whether it's still there or not.
What about where you worked first?
I started, those days when you turned 18 during the war, you were man-pad. Could be man-pad to a linen flax factory or something like that. And I finished, I was at the orchard and came down. I've been up there for about 3 months.
Where was the orchard?
Up at Clyde. And I was working there, and then I came back, and until I turned 18 for about 6 months, a lady at Lawnville wanted someone to help her, and they lent me a bike, and I used to bike up there, say about 8 in the morning and come home about 4 at night, and I used to do housework and everything up there. 10 shillings a week I got. And then when she didn't want me, there was another lady, her husband was overseas, and she wanted me to go up and stay the nights there, and she lent me a bike, and I used to do a bit of work in the morning and then go back up there after tea at night. I used to bike 2 or 3 miles. And I think she gave me 10 shillings a week, and then she had someone come to stay with her. And I was just on 18 then, so there was a job they wanted, domestics at the hospital. And anyway, you had to have 3 references to go and apply for these jobs. So I went there and worked there. And we didn't get uniforms or anything, and we worked 48 hours a week and a day and a half off a week. And I used to start at 7 in the morning till about 1, and then come back on again at 4, I think, till about 6 o'clock. Used to bike backwards and forwards. And we got £4.15 and 4 a fortnight, our money. And out of that, I paid Mum 10 shillings a fortnight for board. I gave 10 shillings a fortnight to pay off a second-hand bike, and Mum made me take out a building society, and that was at 18 and 4pence a month. I used to pay into a Southland Building Society, and I was only left with about £2. It was pounds those days. I was left with about £2 to myself to buy clothes and do everything like that. And she made us start a glory box, and each pay, we'd buy a wee dish or something like that, or something you put in your glory box, so that when you got married you had everything, got our mats, our blankets, everything in mine. And I was there for, I did 6 years there, but while I was there, I went up to North Island, another girl and I. We went up to Hastings, and we worked in a hotel there for a wee while, and then we went down to Wellington and boarded with her cousin, and I worked in it was a tea room, and I was behind the bar in the milkshake there until I joined the other ones at a tobacco factory. I worked in a tobacco factory for quite a few weeks until Christmas. And then I went up to a place called Paraparaumu and worked in a hotel up there. As sort of a housemaid in the hotel. We were right opposite the beach, and we used to go every morning in the winter and everything over for a swim in the sea. And we were there. I was there for a year, and they had bore water in that there, and my teeth all started getting rotten in there. So I came home and got my teeth out, went back to the hospital for about another year, a couple of years. And then I went over. There used to be people called Crawfords that run the tea rooms, and they had a microwave freezing works. And my dad used to have a lovely garden, and they used to come and buy veggies off there, cabbages and things. And I happened to be at home at the time, and anyway, they said, "Oh, would I go and work there?" So I finished off the summer season there for several months. And then that came to an end. It was sold and they left. So the season had closed down, so there was this job at the Grand Hotel going. So I applied for that, and that was when I met Grandad. He had a boat, him and Stuart Burns had a boat in the section next door to us. And they were doing this old boat up there. So I met him through that. And I was at the hotel, I suppose, for about 20 months until we were married. Grandad used to come up,
She was
up to my room, and the girls used to
acting
bring him
chef,
the pick of the menu.
very
The
famous
Grand
cook.
Hotel was the main hotel in Invercargill those days, big posh place. Now it's a catering outfit. It was bought by Polytech. I think they run Polytech. People aboard there now.
So when were you married? What date and where?
On the 3rd of May 1951 at St. Stephen's Church at Waikiki.
Reverend MacDonald.
Yeah, Reverend MacDonald, Tom MacDonald married her.
Excuse me, Tom. Go
In
for it.
fact, we've got the Bible with his inscription in it. He gave us the Bible as a wedding present. And our wedding breakfast was out at Elmwood Gardens. I think that's still going out there, Elmwood Gardens. Those days, we paid for our own wedding because Joyce got married just 8 months before me. Ruth got married 5 months after. And Mum and Dad couldn't afford it, and I was on good money, so we paid for our own wedding. I've still got the receipt for it. I think it was 5 shillings a head, and we had 89. Actually, the time we were married, there was a strike with the shipping and railway and things right throughout New Zealand, and you couldn't get on trains, you couldn't get on planes or anything. So we got a rental car, and we went up as far. We stayed the first night in Gore. Then we went up to way up Rangiora. No, not that far. Geraldine. We stayed in an aunt, because we were going to stay there, and they had visitors, so we stayed at the hotel somewhere there. And then we went up to Sutherland's at Rakaia, and we stayed with them, and Rutherford's at Rakaia. Duntroon, we went down to Duntroon, and we stayed at Duntroon with the old lady Sutherland and the Rutherfords. And then we stayed with Iona a night in Dunedin. She was married then. And then we just went back down to Invercargill. That was our...
We weren't married that long. We were over in Fiji.
when we got married first, Auntie Joyce she was expecting Stephen at the time, and they were short of staff. The chef and one of the other cooks left, so they got me to go back to the hotel. So I only stayed until July, till she had Stephen, and then I just gave up work. But I was only married about when we were married in May, and then the next year in October we went over to Fiji. So I was only married about a year and 10 months before we went over there.
And
And then,
what were you doing in Fiji?
oh, George.
Well, I was mechanical foreman in charge of all vehicles for repairs, maintenance, and general duties on the station.
Is this at Nandi Airport?
Nandi Airport, and we worked for the Nandi Airport Authority. And that was governed by the New Zealand, Australia, English, and
American.
and
The Americans were there.
the Americans. And we sort of took over, and that was in the 1952, we took over
In 1952.
and got rid of all the old ex-American trucks that had been left there in the wartime and everything and used in the airport for general maintenance and that. And we took on new vehicles, Bedfords mainly, and we were there for when they resealed the whole of the runways. And just general maintenance to the airport itself in the way of mechanical stuff. I had about 30 under my wing, 30 natives under my wing for general repairs, general driving, general work associated with mechanical
Your position there was?
mechanical foreman. Then when Ozzy Harbin left, I took over his complete job. That was mechanical foreman, was in charge of all the diesel plant. In the way of generators and standby generators, graders, you name it, to keep everything going. That was mechanical foreman. I then went up to mechanical overseer, and the civil aviation wanted me and Jean, of course, they knew would be there, to go to a place called Aitutaki in the Cook Islands group. There was a landing strip there put in by the Americans during the war, and they wanted that straightened up a bit.
2 years, wasn't it?
And keep my eye out for 2 years, keep my eye on the plant and keep everything going in the way of generating equipment. But it wasn't going to work out.
Well, we wanted to have two months to go back to New Zealand for another 2 months leave, and they wouldn't come up there. And there was no shops there, were there?
No shops, no
other
nothing.
Europeans or anything.
And but it was a very good place. There was all the food and whatnot would have to be shipped in, about 4 times a year. But there was no educational facilities for Ken or anything like that. But it was a great adventure, really, going to Fiji. We think about chaps and women going to the States to drive trucks over there for harvesting and all the rest of it. Well, Jean and I went to Fiji, and Pan American World Airways were coming in there with strata cruisers. We had a DC-4 stationed at Nandi Airport, belonged to Pan American, as well as the new aircraft made by the Lockheed people. They were
Super Constellation?
Super Constellations. They were working their way through there, and the route was from usually California, Los Angeles, California, or Vancouver. What we call BCPA, British Commonwealth Pacific Airlines, were running, and that was owned by the New Zealand, Australian, English governments. Also, Pan American World Airways and Canadian Pacific were working down through there too. I just forget what the charges were for. I know Jean's mother and father come over to Fiji when we were there, and they had a great time.
And they had enough.
You sheltered in that trip, did you?
Yeah.
Remember what it cost to fly them there in those days? Or
Oh, I know. It was pounds, shillings and pence, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I saved enough money. We got over there in October, and I saved enough money to come home in February. It was my bridesmaid's wedding and Valmay's wedding.
Yeah.
And I flew home for that. And then we come home when you were 6 months old.
In the 4 years that we're, 4.5 years that we're at Nandi, there was always something to do in the way of work, or not very far away was the CSR, Colonial Sugar Refining Company, a major sugar mill there at Lautoka, hospital at Lautoka.
And those folk from Tauta came over and we went for a ride on the sugar train. Ken was you were about 8 or 9 months. And they had you on a movie thing, us standing in the sort of carriage of the sugarcane train, and they photographed us going from Nandi, wasn't it, until Lautoka.
Yeah. The ships, overseas ships, would call into Lautoka with supplies and pick up sugar. So there was quite massive sugar fields there, wasn't there? The Indians run them mainly. But a highlighter was a jet aircraft, a pure jet aircraft coming into Nandi. Landed, stayed overnight. Captain Cunningham was his name, I think, the pilot. I got his signature somewhere in a book. And that was a jet Comet, C4, I think it was, something like that. Beautiful aircraft. It came in and stayed. I towed it from where it pulled up and stopped. We had a tarmac tractor there, and we towed it, or I towed it, from there to a resting place overnight. Police guard and everything over it. Next morning I had a check around, towed it out a wee bit, so it was clear of the buildings and the departure lounge and all the rest. It towed it a wee bit out of the way, and they started up all engines and just quietly went down to the end of the runway, and it was gone. Beautiful aircraft though. We had the odd crash at one Sunday. The DC-4 belonged to Pan American World Airways, was stationed at Nandi, and some chaps went away fishing for the day and they got lost. And they put the DC-4 up to see if the crew or any of them could spot these fishermen. Sure enough, they found them. And on the way back, it was squally weather and terrible thunderstorm and rain, and the DC-4 overshot the runway.
Photo of it, haven't you, up on its nose?
Yeah, ripped the front undergear off, and it landed up on its nose. So it was temporarily repaired at Nandi and then flown back to the States. Another one was there in its place. But those aircraft come in from Vancouver, Los Angeles, down through Honolulu, sometimes Canton Island, depending on fuel, Nandi, Auckland, Nandi to Sydney. I just can't remember the prices of what the trip was from Nandi back to Auckland. I'm not sure. Truly a great experience. And something of interest, a C-97 came in there one day, and they wanted the use of our crane. We had a Coles crane there that originally belonged to the Yarns at AF. We had that. They wanted a bit of heavy lifting done, some filming gear or something or other. I just forget. And these chaps were scientists, and they had this aircraft loaded up with radio transmission gear. And they were looking for the black hole, as they called it, out in this, what would that be, in the ionosphere or the stratosphere? And those days in the 50s, they were looking for that then, where some of the signals were transmitted out, and they hit or the radio signal bounced back off. What the hang were they? You call them out in outer space?
Ionosphere or something?
Yeah. Some of those. No, some of those signals would disappear completely. They wouldn't bounce back. They just kept on going for thousands and thousands of miles into space. And these Americans knew what they were doing, and they'd send a signal out, and it would bounce back, and it was coming off, what would you say, not a comet, but another planet out there somewhere. And they were working on it those days, trying to find out where these signals were coming from and going out of space. Very interesting thing.
I thought you were going to say about the time they had all the luggage out of the plane and they were doing engine repairs and you were sitting on this big box and someone said, "Oh, do you know what you're sitting on?" And George said no, and he was sitting on the
ex-mayor of Sydney.
He
was dead. He was just like me sitting on here. And he was the ex-mayor of Sydney underneath the coffin.
Big box.
And I was sitting on it. Oh, amusing incidents like that.
And we had, we didn't have washing machines, washing facilities in our flats. And I used to have an Indian girl used to come, Rita used to come once a week. And all our, like George used to wear khaki shorts and shirts and they're all starched and my frocks and things. And she used to come once a week and take the washing away over to a wash place and do the washing. And then the next day she'd come and do the ironing. And it was 10 shillings cost you a week to get that done. She made a beautiful job on that. She had a wee girl she used to bring around with her and then she was expecting another one and she come to work that day and she washed her sari. They used to wear these saris. She washed her sari and walked away home. And the next day she had 2 boys and one of the boys came out with a note from the mother saying that she'd had the baby because she got home that night and could I give her the money, she wanted the money for doing the work. So she was back at work the next week, a few days later, carrying this brand new baby with her, just stuck her down on the bread and she went away and did the work and then came and picked the baby up and went to the next place. I named that one Valerie, she let me name the last one.
You could go into Nandi Township, as long as you were early enough there, about 9 o'clock, into Nandi Township and get measured up for a pair of shorts, working shorts as we call them.
Yeah, white ones, white
yeah,
long
and they'll be finished at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That'll be 2 and 6, Mr. Chilton, thank you. Or else if you've got premier shorts, good pockets and all the rest of them, lined and everything, they were 5 shillings. And they're still ready at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
I just forget what it costs for frocks for me.
And
you go and get measured and you get them in no time.
And
no, the old treadle machines, no electric machines those days.
And occasionally the Indians, especially the Indians, but the Fijians were there too. Some of the drivers, the mechanics and other ones who were around would invite us down to their little pavilion they had, say on a Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock. And they'd invite us down and to have a drink or whatever you wish to do. And running around there'd be half a dozen chooks, roosters or whatever the case may be, and they'd disappear. And here they were cutting the heads off, plucking them and cooking them up and trying to feed us up on them too. They'd been running around the yard, and the curry, chicken curry was that hot you were glad to drink raw whiskey after it. It was that hot with the taste of curry and that sort of chives or whatever they put in there. And we had to stop out there. It was just looking forward to it and a drink or two of whiskey on a Friday night. But that was all taken care of. They were very good and peace-loving people. That was the Indians and the Fijians. We thought that anyway. And towards the end, the airways got very, very busy. Scandinavian Airlines, there was all sorts coming through for the not the Empire Games, what they call them, the Olympic Games that were, I think they held them in Sydney. I think everything was heading towards Sydney. Pretty sure on that.
Was it the Commonwealth?
Commonwealth it could have been, but there was aircraft coming in from all points of the world, landing at Nandi, refuelling and taking off for Sydney. And I think it was the, I got a feeling, did they ever have the Olympic Games there?
Well, I did in 2000, 5 years ago, but they...
Well, this would be 1953 or 54. And those aircraft were coming in there right, left and centre. Never any accidents or anything like that. I've got a photo somewhere with 5 principal aircraft, Boeing Stratocruisers, DC-6B, the other one we're talking about, the Australians, that was
Super Constellation.
Super Connies and that, all parked out in front of the terminal building at Nandi, and that's how busy they were some days. 5 arrivals, 5 departures. All piston engine aircraft. And what I was going to say was they had all these aircraft belonging to the United States Navy,
I think we're at the end of the tape.
military air transport, and all that. And that was for the year of, or something or other, down at the Antarctic. And all these aircraft come through from Nandi